In this video, we're going to go over Module 1, Topic 2, Lesson 5, Part 1. So by the end of this video, you should be able to answer these questions. How can you check that your answer is correct? How can you rewrite the equation without fractions? What do you do what do the solutions mean in the term of the given equation? Why must the quadratic equation appear in standard form to use the quadratic formula? And how do you separate your work into two equations? And how can you graph to check your solutions? So, what we're going to start talking about is how to solve quadratic equations using the square root property. So, if you have a quadratic equation in one of these forms, so 3 of these forms are very similar to that vertex form. And then the third form is similar to when you don't have that b term. You're able to solve using the square root property. So what that would look like in this case is you would start by adding 9 to both sides. 27 plus 9 is 36. And then to undo something that's squared, you will square root both sides. Now, when you square root both sides, most people would just say x is equal to 6. But you're missing a value, so anytime you're solving an equation and you're taking the square root, you have to remember plus or minus 6. So what this means is that you actually have two values, x equals 6 and x equals negative 6. Okay, if we look at this next equation, same concept, it just is written in a more of a vertex form. So you always want to get the squared part by itself. So we want to move this 3 to the other side by dividing it. When we do that, 48 divided by 3 is 16. And so now we have what's being squared completely by itself. And to solve, we can square root both sides. When we square root the right side, you're just left with x minus 1 because the radical cancels out the exponent. On the other side, most people would say 4, but remember we're solving an equation, so you need the plus or minus. So now, in a situation like this, you need to split this up into two different equations because you're going to get two different answers when you solve. So our first equation is just going to be 4 equals x minus 1. Our second equation, we use negative 4 with x minus 1. So to solve, we're going to add 1 to both sides. When we do that, we get 5 is equal to x. On the second equation, we still add 1 to both sides, but this time it's negative 4 plus 1, which is negative 3 equals x. And so now we found our two answers. If we wanted to check ourselves for both of these, we could graph it and find the x-intercepts, and it should give us these values. Now, we're going to review some other ways of solving. So we're going to review factoring a quadratic equation. So in this case, the first thing you look for, is there a number or variable that goes into all 3 of our terms evenly? And that answer is no, so therefore we need to factor. Since there's a number in front of our x squared, we need to use the slide and divide method. So I'm going to go ahead and bring out the x. So we're going to slide this 8 and multiply it times 9. That gives us 72. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take the negative 18 and put it on bottom. So now what we need to figure out are what two numbers can multiply to get us 72 and add to get us a negative 18. Okay, and so those two numbers would be a negative 6 and a negative 12. And so this would factor, or we would write our factors as x minus 6 times x minus 12. But this is not equivalent to what we started with. So you have to remember, we're doing the slide and divide method. We did the slide. Now we need to divide by that same number. So when we do that, these fractions simplify to 6 over 8 simplifies to 3 over 4. And 12 over 8 simplifies to 3 over 2. And so, again, still not equivalent, but remember when you have something left in the denominator, it goes in front of the x that it's with. And so we get 4x minus 3 and 2x minus 3. And now this is equivalent to what we started with. So we started in standard form, and we took it down here, and now it's in factored form. Okay, to solve, we would set each individual factor equal to 0. And so we would get plus 3 plus 3. That would be 4x equals 3. Then we would divide both sides by 4. And so we get an x value that is 3/4. Go to the second equation, plus 3. That gives us 2x equals 3. And then divide by 2. And so we get x is equal to a 3/2. So we have just found our x-intercepts. If you want to write it as a decimal, you could write it as a decimal. And then if you wanted to check your work, again, you would graph, find the x-intercepts, and make sure that these two numbers match. Okay, now moving on to the next part, the quadratic formula. So first thing, we need to fix this right here. This should not be a B, that should be an A. So the quadratic formula is another way to find the solutions of a quadratic equation, which means it's another way to find the x-intercepts, the roots, the zeros. Okay, so all you do is you plug in your information into this quadratic formula. Okay, so it's really just plugging stuff in and simplifying. So that's what we're going to do. Use the quadratic formula to determine the zeros. So first thing we need to do is we need to identify our A, our B, and our C. So we have A is equal to 2, B is equal to 4, and C is equal to a -6. So all we're going to do is we're going to plug this information in to the quadratic formula. So we have -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. So we're going to plug in our stuff. So b squared minus 4 times a times c. And it's going to all be over 2 times a, boom. So from here, it seems very overwhelming, but what I want you to do first is I want you to clean up what is underneath the radical. So this part only. I don't want you to type in the radical, I just want you to simplify that. So 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times -6. That should give you a 64. And so when you do that, it makes the equation just a little bit more manageable. And then on the bottom, 2 times 2 is 4. So from here, we simplify. What is the square root of 64? That is 8 over 4. Okay? So now that we've done this, what we're able to do is we're able to write two equations. We have -4 plus 8 over 4, and then x equals -4 minus 8 over 4. Okay, so we simplify this. Negative 4 plus 8 is 4 over 4, and x is equal to 1. On the second equation, negative 4 minus 8, that is a negative 12. Negative 12 over 4 is a negative 3. So we now have our two solutions. So if you want to pause the video and try B for yourself, go ahead and do so. It's the same concept. Okay, so we have our A is 2, our B is 10, our C is 4.5. So we have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So let's plug in our stuff. So again, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. And then let me put the top on the radical. So, just like before, my suggestion is to simplify the underneath so it makes it more manageable. So when we do that, we have a negative 10 plus or minus 10 squared minus 4 times 2 times 4.5 gives us a 64 all over 2 times 2, which is 4. So we can simplify this a little bit more. Square root of 64 is 8 all over 4. Now that we have all numbers, we can go ahead and separate this into two separate equations. So negative 10 plus 8 over 4 and negative 10 minus 8 over 4. So negative 10 plus 8 is a negative 2 over 4, and that gives us a negative 1/2 simplified. And this one right here, we get a negative 18 over 4, and so that simplifies to a negative 9 over 2. Again, you could write these as decimals if you wanted to, and to check your work, you would graph this quadratic equation and you would look for the x-intercepts, the zeros, the roots, the solutions, and you should get those. Okay, to end off the lesson, you have an example of factoring, one that is not slide and divide, and then you have a different example of the quadratic formula. That way you have it there for you. So if you have any questions, please make sure you write it down so you can ask for help.